Preston in Utah, why don't we accept creation and resurrection claims?
Oh, I'm so glad to be on today.
Yay! Thanks for calling.
It's the easiest question I've ever had, because somebody says, Matt, why don't you believe the creation or the resurrection? It's really easy, because there isn't sufficient evidence to warrant belief.
Yes, I haven't been on your show before, but I've listened to your show a lot. Maybe I haven't listened enough to hear these particular arguments that I'm bringing up. I'm assuming that you have opinions on them, but I just couldn't find them. So I wanted to hear them. So I know that physics doesn't require a God. I completely understand that. You could put a totally godless universe together based on the laws of physics. Mm-hmm. However, I'm sure you're familiar with the, I guess, the metaphor of if I put $10 into a drawer and then $10 in tomorrow, and then the next day I open the drawer and there's nothing in there, it's not because the laws of physics or the math was broken. It's because there was an outside interaction. So if something happens...
No, I've never heard that metaphor. Is that a famous metaphor?
You kind of understand it, though?
I get it. If I put $10 in a drawer and I come back and it's missing, something happened to that $10. Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't math that was broken. It was an outside force. So,
well, I don't know that it was an outside force. Something happened. I need an explanation. If I put $10 in this drawer right here and I come back later and it's gone, I need an explanation for it. I don't know what the candidate explanations are yet, although I can start listing some. At no point would I be justified in claiming that there's a supernatural candidate until somebody demonstrates a supernatural candidate that should be included on the list.
Yeah. I guess what I'm just saying is, if your $10 goes missing, it's not that money just disappears sometimes. Somebody took it.
Except, no. This is the problem. You have decided what the candidate explanations are, and you have honed in on the one that you think is most likely. Well, the fact of the matter is, I have in fact lost money in a drawer where no one else was involved. And it's because of the mechanisms of a drawer and air, where a loose bill in that drawer, if it's opened or opened too quickly, that can cause it to adhere up, fall back behind, and now it's no longer in the drawer, even though no other person was involved. It's not worth it. We are agency detection machines, and we are really prone to seeing agency. If you think that every time something goes missing, the most likely explanation is that somebody's taken it or fucking with you, that's paranoia. There are other explanations.
Yeah.
This is what magicians
I apologize.
expect and make use of. Magicians are, all we do is use your assumptions against you. That's it. All I do as a magician, I know something you don't know, and I know how to exploit it. That's it. And and it's so easy because we all do it to ourselves, and you just did it with a $10 bill in a drawer.
Yeah, I apologize for the confusion. I'm just using that as an example, I guess, of something that's been brought up before.
Sure.
My real argument is how life could be created given the laws of entropy.
So first of all, you don't get to use the word created.
Okay, how it could come about.
Right. And so when we ask that question right now, the answer is, I don't know. And anybody who wants to say they do know has to demonstrate evidence for their proposed thing. Just like you would have to say, if the $10 went missing and you think that somebody stole it, you have to present evidence for that. There are other candidate explanations. And until we have sufficient evidence to tell which of the candidates is the likely one, the only position we should be holding is that we don't know what happened to that $10 and that we don't know how life began. That's it. And if I can demonstrate that, see, here's the problem, is that you thought you came up with a solid example where I would just say, yep, somebody took it. Well, you didn't. You came up with an example for which I can come up with a number of different explanations, and none of them are supernatural. So I have a bunch of explanations for a missing $10, and at no point did I have to say God did it. But you're looking at the world going, hey, I need candidate explanations for why there's life. And then you say, a bunch of people think that a God did it, so I'll just count that as a candidate explanation. Well, you're ignoring all the people who think that universe farting pixies did it. You have already biased yourself towards a potential explanation when there isn't good evidence for that explanation at all.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you right, you're saying that although it seems like life appearing goes against the laws of entropy, that doesn't mean that it was created by a supernatural force.
I'm not even convinced it goes against the laws of entropy.
Okay, because you're saying that we don't quite understand them because we haven't completely uncovered all of science.
Well, entropy is a very specific category for thermal energy in a system. Now, considering we live here on Earth, first of all, we don't necessarily know that life originated on Earth or under what conditions. We don't know, and if it did, because it could be, panspermia is not outside the question. There are things that didn't originate on Earth that are now on Earth. We know that to be the case. There are a number of different category explanations or potential explanations. The study of abiogenesis has shown in the Miller-Urey experiments not how it happened, but that it could happen, or that this is not remotely implausible. There are other scientists working on this issue of abiogenesis, but entropy applies to an isolated system, and yet the Earth is constantly receiving energy from the sun. So it's not an isolated system. So
yeah, I like that. That's great.
That's so. And I'm not even, somebody's going to already email. Somebody already emailed me the other day to say, no, it's not about a closed system. It's about an isolated system. So I'm trying to correct that. But if you say that the life arising on Earth is in violation of the laws of physics, is in violation of empathy, then that's something that you should present a paper on and get a Nobel Prize, because I'm not convinced that that's the case. But even if I assume that you're correct, and we don't have an explanation for how life could arise, and it seems to be in conflict with notions like entropy, that doesn't tell us what the right answer is, does it?
You're right, yeah.
It's the curse of my life, being right.
I have a second question if you have time for it.
Sure,
go ahead.
Okay, cool. Well, I just want to say that I'm not here to prove myself right or anything. I really want to understand your point of view. So that's why I'm asking these questions.
I appreciate that.
Second one is about the resurrection. The interesting thing is, as I've listened to the show, it's sometimes come up that some atheists don't believe that Jesus was even a real person, but that he could be more than one person combined into some kind of historical figure.
I think I've said that.
Other explanations like that. Okay.
Could be.
Well, it seems like, this could be kind of the same argument as entropy, that we don't know and things like that. But what about the fact that it is less likely for a person's enemy to acknowledge a virtue in that person than their friend would be,
I get that. Please point to any enemy of Jesus that ever acknowledged anything.
Well, I guess what I'm just specifically pointing at is, what do you think about the fact that, in general, the Jews claimed that Jesus never was resurrected? Of course, they claim that his body was stolen.
That is one of many candidate explanations for the story. Some Jews believe that, but I'm not convinced that there was a body, let alone a body to be stolen.
Okay, so why? Let's see.
But I can't rule it out. Here's the thing:
if a group of people who don't even like Jesus would say that his body was stolen, therefore,
who are these people? Name one Jew who ever said that the body was stolen, who had access to the information. The fact that, so here's what happened. Somebody told a story about Jesus, and as it spread, other people said, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? So we have no information. So first of all, we have no original copies of anything written in the New Testament, which means everything in the New Testament is a copy of a copy to begin with. We don't know who wrote a good chunk of them, and we have no way to investigate any of them. And so the people who were like, here are some Jews who are claiming that the reason the tomb was empty was because the body was stolen. You cannot point to any of those Jews. You cannot interview any of those Jews. That's like me saying, hey, I really didn't do it. And I have 10 friends who can vouch for me and 3 friends who suggest that they know somebody else who stole the body, but I'm not going to let you talk to any of them. Mm-hmm. You're believing stories about stories about stories, and you're counting it. You actually use the word fact. There is nothing within the Christ story in the New Testament, including his birth, miracles, death, or resurrection, which is an actual demonstrable fact. Nothing. Now, yeah, in that situation, the stories that you're talking to, see, okay, Paul Saul had a Damascus Road experience, changed his name to Paul. He wrote some books, but there are books in the New Testament that are attributed to Paul, which we know are forgeries and know were written by somebody else. And then you have all these stories saying, there are Jews that suggest we stole the body, but we didn't. Well, congratulations. Please provide what the actual story was. Because when you start saying, I believe Jesus was bodily resurrected, and there are people out there who claim we stole the body, but we definitely didn't do that. Nobody in that room at that moment should believe it, let alone people 2,000 years later reading about it from anonymous accounts that are copies of translations of copies.
Okay. Yeah, I think I understand that. All right. So I just have a quick question. So are you looking for proof? Or, I mean, it seems like no amount of evidence is going to be enough.
That seems to be absolutely dishonest, and I'm going to let you go and think about what you just said, because the fact of the matter is Jenna and I will believe anything when there's sufficient evidence. And what you've done and what everybody else has done for the entire history of these arguments is present no evidence, none at all. And when we point this out, you guys keep saying, it just seems like no amount of evidence can ever convince you guys. That is the most dishonest shit I've ever heard. It's not our fault that you believe things for which you cannot and will not present actual evidence. How dare you sit here and keep acknowledging that, oh yeah, I understand, and that makes sense, and I'm just trying to understand, but it seems like no amount of evidence would ever convince you. Well, fuck right on off. And I didn't even have to yell that.